Braden Smith's health might be one of the more important factors for this Colts 2024 season. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. And today we are talking important X factors for this Colts season with a little bit of a twist on it. These X factors are guys who maybe aren't the superstars or the top names that we're really talking about going into the season, but these are players who will undoubtedly just impact wins and losses going into the 2024 season, and in particular when it comes to their health. Just the fact of these guys being on the football field next year could be a massive impact on this Colts team. And no, we're not talking Anthony Richardson. We're trying to go a little bit deeper cut. I mean, not super deep cut, but a little bit more deeper cut than Anthony Richardson, because that's the given right there. So we're going to kick this off by talking about right tackle Braden Smith, because I think this is the most important storyline, or one of the more important storylines when it comes to this Colts offense and the effectiveness of this Colts offense. One can even argue that outside of Anthony Richardson and Bernhard Raimann at left tackle, Braden Smith is the third most important, offensive player on this Colts team. His impact was felt massively last season. I have the numbers here we're going to run through in a second, but just to give an overview on Braden Smith as a player, he was a top 50 pick by the Colts in 2018, has been a fantastic starting right tackle for the entire time since then, since he became the starter during that 2018 season at right tackle. He has dealt with some injuries last year, and that's really where a lot of his issues came last season, where it's like when he was on the field, Braden Smith was one of the best tackles in football, but simply being on the field was the big issue for Braden Smith last year. He only played in 10 games, but really it was just 9 games that he played over half of the game. He left, I think, 3 games early last year with injuries. He only was held to 575 total snaps. For comparison, Blake Freeland, the guy who filled in for him most of the time, finished last season with more snaps than Braden Smith did, with 701 offensive snaps. And that's never a good sign. I mean, if I told you guys last year, prior to last season, that Braden Smith would be outsnapped by Blake Freeland, we would all be very, very concerned. And, again, when you look at the numbers, there's a reason to be concerned there. But when Braden Smith was on the field last year, really, really great results. His 83.3 overall grade by Pro Football Focus was, I think, 6th overall among all offensive tackles, getting at least 20% of the overall snaps that Pro Football Focus graded. He was the third highest run blocking tackle in all of football. According to Pro Football Focus, he allowed 0 sacks, only 2 QB hits, and 12 pressures allowed as well. So very, very strong production. If you really want to get a gauge on how important his play was, though, at right tackle, let's look at his backup in Blake Freeland. And I know this is kind of unfair to Freeland because Freeland was in his rookie season. It's a tough adjustment to the NFL, but I think this is a great comparison just to show how important Braden Smith is to this Colts team. Blake Freeland, in his 701 offensive snaps last year, had a 44.2 Pro Football Focus grade, 4 sacks allowed, 4 QB hits, and 37 pressures allowed in those snaps. So in roughly, a few more snaps, obviously, than Braden Smith, a little over 100 snaps than Braden Smith. Blake Freeland had 25 more pressures allowed. He had 2 more QB hits and 4 more sacks allowed. And Freeland did jump between playing left tackle and right tackle in a couple of these starts, but overall, you can see that just discrepancy in play right there, especially in the pass blocking department. And the run blocking department is even bigger. I want to say Braden Smith was in the 90s with his overall grade for Pro Football Focus, where Blake Freeland was, I think, a 47 in run blocking grades. So just not great production there. You could even argue, I don't even think we have to put any kind of disclaimer on here. I think you could argue that the drop from Braden Smith to Blake Freeland is the biggest drop-off from starter to backup on this Colts team, because Braden Smith is arguably a top 5, top 6 player on the Colts when it comes to talent and overall production, where Blake Freeland really struggled last year in his rookie debut and in the games following that. So Braden Smith, very, very important player when he's on the field. Another big impact when it comes to just simply him being on the field versus off the field is in the run game. I mean, if you look at the run game numbers, I actually did all the math today on this. When Braden Smith played more than 40 snaps last year. So in pretty much every game that he appeared in outside of the Titans game, the second Titans game where he only played in 3 snaps, the Colts rushed the ball 268 times for 1,242 yards and 13 touchdowns. That's 4.6 yards per carry. And that was all in 9 games right there. So not amazing numbers, but 4.6 yards per carry. Like, you can win football games with that right there. Pretty good numbers. In the games that Braden Smith did not appear in, or also counting that Titans game that he only played 3 snaps in, the Colts ran the ball 211 times for 817 yards, which is 3.87 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. And that was in 8 games right there. So about almost a yard difference in yards per carry. We're talking 400 yards in the run game. This is only one extra game, 9 games versus 8 games. So Braden Smith's impact on the run game by itself is just insurmountable. I mean, it's such a massive, massive difference. They're almost double the touchdowns in the same amount of games, or essentially the same amount of games there with Braden Smith in there versus without him in the lineup. So yeah, the big drop off from Braden Smith to Blake Freeland is massive. And this is where this becomes such an X factor for this Colts team, where, the greatest ability in the NFL is availability. And Braden Smith last year did not have that availability, because even in the games that he did play, I mean, we saw that Houston Texans game at the end of the year where, Braden Smith's having a fantastic game. The Colts are running the ball all over the Texans. And then that last quarter and a half, when the Colts really needed, to really finish the job and punch their ticket to the playoffs, Braden Smith's injuries just kept him out of the game. And the Colts rushing attack just grounded to the halt. I mean, I want to say Jonathan Taylor was averaging like 10 yards a carry up to that point, and finished the game with still a great number, but the Colts were not able to run the ball once Braden Smith left that game. And that's not to say that, like, oh, the player's at fault here for injuries. Injuries happen. It's part of football. But the greatest ability in the NFL is availability. And if Braden Smith cannot finish games, cannot play in more than 9 games this year, then what are we doing here? What are we doing? Among all the offensive tackles that Pro Football Focus graded with like an 80+ grade last year, he was the only one to have less than 700 or 800 snaps on offense. So he just needs to be on the field this year. And if he can be on the field, this Colts offense can be everything it needs to be. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's health is important too, but if Richardson's out there and Shane Steichen's calling the plays, the Colts are going to have a productive offensive system going. But they need their offensive tackle play to be at that high level, or to be what it can be with Braden Smith and Bernhard Raimann on the field. Raimann, for the most part, has stayed healthy. Knock on wood, he's been able to stay healthy. He's only missed the one game last year with concussion. I don't think he missed any time due to injury in his rookie season once he became the starter. So Bernhard Raimann has been relatively healthy. For Braden Smith, though, it is a big question mark. He hasn't finished seasons. Last year was his most injury-plagued season in his NFL career. So him simply being on the football field makes the Colts a better team. But he needs to be on the football field next year. It can't be another 9 to 10 games. Even if those 9 to 10 games that we get from Braden Smith is fantastic offensive football because he's such an impact player, he just needs to be out there for more games if the Colts want to have a chance of making the playoffs. You can't just rely on offensive explosion in the games that Braden Smith plays if he's only going to play like 10 games, because then you're at a disadvantage in those other 6, 7, whatever it's going to be. So at the end of the day, Braden Smith's health is a major X factor. I know he had a lot of surgery and things to clean it up here in this offseason, so hopefully that can propel him to playing more games next year. But Braden Smith, man, I mean, this is kind of a complimentary section, but also a worrisome section, because it's like when he was on the field last year, he was fantastic. He just needs to be on the field next season. Like, that's really the big thing for him. And hopefully he can get out there and finish, a full 17-game stretch for the Colts and help this team get into the playoffs in 2024. But coming up, we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to go away from the injury front and talk about 2 players who just need to get over that hump. If this Colts defense is going to be able to be effective next season, these 2 players need to get over the hump and propel this Colts defensive line to greatness, and that's Kwity Paye and Dayo Adangbo. But first, whether you're a Hoosier who needs tickets to go see the Reds, Cubs, White Sox, shoot, even locally here with the Indy Indians, Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to that first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You get last minute deals, which saves you up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and etc. And all those really fun stuff there. I can name off a million things that you guys can buy over there at Gametime. They have the zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. You get seat views, get that panoramic view from your seat from the app before you buy. Over the coming days in Indy, you got the Indians, the Fever, and 11, plus several concerts to choose from. I know Jake is actually out right now because he's going to a concert, I believe, in Tennessee. So that's why I'm doing this show solo today. So again, take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets for any of your big events with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And Locked On Colts listeners, are you guys tired of watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? I mean, that shouting and the hot takery just gets crazy. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel is programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels at part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers. We're here talking two pass rushers, Kwity Paye and Dayo Odeyingbo. Now, when it comes to this segment, obviously injuries haven't been as big a concern for these two. I know Kwity Paye has dealt with his fair share the last two seasons, but for the most part, these guys have been relatively healthy with the Colts. But the big thing with these two guys is, can they elevate their game past the point that we've currently seen? What we've currently seen from these two players has been fine. It has been solid, good, never really great. I mean, some great stretches, obviously, from like Dayo Odeyingbo, but for the most part, it's been really solid from these two guys. But can they take it to the next step? When we look at this Colts team and what they have at pass rusher this next season, it's easy to get excited. You look at DeForest Buckner, who's consistently one of the best defensive tackles in football. Even though he's not hitting double-digit sacks, he's playing some great football. And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're watching out there. DeForest Buckner is a fantastic player. Laiatu Latu's coming in here with a lot of expectations and skill, and I think we're going to see a really great season from him as a rookie. And then Samson Ebukam, I mean, you're getting really good things from him as a veteran pass rusher in the room. So I think all of those guys kind of have relatively simple expectations that you know that they're all going to hit or at least get close to. I mean, Laiatu Latu, obviously a rookie, so there's a wider range, but for the most part, I think it's relatively easy to expect him and to see him hit those expectations. But when it comes to Kwity Paye and Dayo Odeyingbo, there's the ultimate question of, can they, bust through that they're just right there on the fringe. They're right there on the fringe of becoming high impact players, like really, really high impact players. Can they get there though? Can they get through this bubble that they're in and make this Colts pass rush just even more deadly? Because if they just continue what they've been doing, it's fine. Like, the Colts pass rush will be good next year, especially if Latu hits his expectations. But if one or both of these guys can really burst through and do something they haven't done yet in the NFL, then we're looking at one of the best pass rushing rooms in all of football. I mean, let's look at Kwity Paye, for instance. Kwity Paye has been a pretty consistent player since day one with the Colts. I mean, his rookie season, he was a slightly better pass rusher and a slightly worse run defender. The last two seasons, though, he's been basically the same thing, which is a below average pass rusher or to average pass rusher and an elite run defender. That's really good. That's really good. I will take that at defensive end all day. He's consistently had around 10 to 11 sacks / QB hits. So if you combine those two per season over all 3 years, his pass rush win rate has hovered around 10% each season, which isn't great. It's fine. Like, it is what it is. You'd want that to be better, but it's fine. The thing for him, though, if he can become like a 12, 13, 14, 15% pass rush win rate guy, like a Samson Ebukam is, for instance, then we're looking at an elite run defender and above average pass rusher, or, fringe really good pass rusher. That would change what we're looking at with him in like huge. It would be so huge if he could just hit those peaks there. And he's had stretches of play where he has been, that 15% pass rush win rate guy, that guy who's been getting more sacks and QB hits, but he's never done that over the course of an entire season. So if Kwity Paye can really turn that corner as a pass rusher with all this extra help around him, this Colts pass rush is going to be, again, one of the better ones in football. So for him, it's really about just taking that slightly next step as a pass rusher, go from being, below average to average, and take that next step into above average and be more of an impact player in that regard. Dayo Dengbo's slightly different story, where every year his QB hits and his sacks have gone up. He's gotten better every single year in that regard. But when you look at the advanced numbers, it's still never really been super promising. His pass rush win rate has actually been lower than Kwity Paye's every single year. He's around that 8 to 9% range, which is, again, pretty below average when it comes to applying consistent pressure. So for these guys to really take that next step, they're getting the sacks. Kwity Paye had 8 sacks last year. Dayo Dengbo had 12 sacks last year, if you go by Pro Football Focus's metric for those respective numbers. But they're not getting the constant pressure. And that's really what the Colts need up front, is that constant pressure. The sacks are awesome. I love the sacks. We're not going to complain about sacks whatsoever, but constant pressure just takes so much of the pain and torment that we're going to see from this Colts secondary next year. It takes it off of our minds because, look, every time the opponent's dropping back, they're getting Latu, DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Dayo Dengbo, whoever it's going to be, creating, positive opportunities for this defense. But those guys need to take this step. Dayo Dengbo needs to be a guy who's, consistently getting pressure if he's going to be a sub-package player who's not great against the run. So far right now, again, he's been converting his few opportunities into sacks and QB hits, which has been great to see. But imagine if those opportunities were just more plentiful, more bountiful. Like if he was actually creating more opportunities for himself rather than having to convert on the few opportunities he has. It's really about taking that next step for him. And same with Kwity Paye, where, he has had some production on the wins that he has had off that right side, but it's about converting them more into consistent pressure and really forcing the quarterback to move within the pocket. Both these guys are very capable. They're very, very talented players, and by no means am I saying these guys are bad football players. They have been very good utility players for this Colts team, but if one or both of these guys can take that next step from being a utility player to being a legitimate difference maker on this team, then this Colts defensive line is just really cooking with fire. I mean, again, Latu, we have reasonable expectations for him that are pretty high, and I think he's going to hit them. DeForest Buckner, fantastic player, always has been. And then Samson Ebukam, who is a really consistent veteran player. We know what those guys are getting. But if Kwity Paye and Dayo Dengbo can really turn it on this year and go from being inconsistent but productive players to well above average and consistent players, then we're looking at a really great defensive line in Indy. And I don't think this is crazy to ask. I think these guys can hit it. They have the potential, and they've shown the ability in the past. So I'm really keeping my eye on these two players in camp. I'm keeping an eye on these guys in the early games this season because this is really, I don't want to say make or break for these guys, because Kwity Paye is obviously kind of extended with that 5th-year option. Dayo Dengbo could be extended as well. I'm not going to say it's make or break for them, but I'm going to say it's like, it would be great to see. It would be really great to see these guys take that step and become a little bit more for this Colts team going forward. But coming up, we're going to talk about one more player that kind of is the encapsulation of what I've talked about with these two other players. With Braden Smith, it's about health. With Kwity Paye and Dayo Dengbo, it's about taking that next step. Well, Juju Brents, it's kind of about both. Can Juju Brents build off of a decent rookie season, and can he stay healthy going into his sophomore campaign? All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we are back. We're talking cornerback Juju Brents, and this one's a little bit different from the others because the Colts cornerback room has been a talk all off season of, Do they need to add more players here? Do they need to get better at corner? Can you win with the current guys they have at cornerback? Where, when we talk about Quiddy and Dio and Braden Smith, we know that these guys are solid players to, above average players in Braden Smith's case. And it's more, other issues that we're really looking at. When it comes to a guy like Juju Brents, though, we don't really know exactly what he is yet. We saw some good flashes last year. I think there were some really positive developments in his rookie season, but I don't think we're there enough with him yet to say, we don't have to worry about cornerback, or one of our cornerback spots is good, because Juju Brents is this solidified, long-term option there. As of right now, again, it's looking pretty solid. I think the 1 interception and 5 pass breakups and nearly 300 coverage snaps. Good, solid season. 17% forced incompletion rate was the highest in the quarterback room, so did some good things there. Had one of the lower missed tackle rates in the cornerback room. I'm pretty happy with that. That's one of my bigger things there. And I think he had some really good flashes against DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley in particular in that middle season stretch against the Jaguars and the Titans. So I think we saw some good things from Juju Brents, but ultimately, again, like what we said with Braden Smith, where it's like the best ability is availability. And Juju Brents didn't show that in his first year. He missed a lot of time in training camp with an injury, dealt with injuries throughout the entire season. Even when he got back out on the field, another injury would sideline him, and then there would be some concerns from there. But I think when he was on the field, he did some good things. So I'm cautiously optimistic about what he can be. Again, I don't know if he can be a cornerback 1 or be some superstar. There were some concerns like the Nico Collins big play. I know he got left on an island in cover 4 when he shouldn't have, but you don't want to see your top corner getting burned like that on national TV in a playoff game, essentially. Not the best showing there, obviously, from the Colts defense or from what you wanted to see. There were some other moments where he could have been more aggressive, or he missed the ball, or just kind of had some coverage mishaps. But again, I think there were some good things. I mean, in man coverage, he was fantastic last year. Had some really good flashes in man coverage. The Colts just don't play much man coverage, so it's hard to really say. But yeah, overall, I think Juju Brents, it's really about just seeing what he can do here in year 2, and can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy out there? Can he get the constant production when he's on the field again? Can he turn some of these near misses into more pass breakups? Because he has it all. I mean, he has every single thing you're looking for in a cornerback prospect or young cornerback player. I mean, he's got the super long arms, he's got the length, he's got the height, he's got the foot speed. I mean, he's such an unnatural player to watch on film, because the 4.5 speed, he looks a lot slower than the 4.5 speed on film. Like, the long speed's not perfect, but he makes up for it with having this great jump ability, this great explosion downhill, this great quickness and fluidity within his short movements, to where you feel like he can be such a dominant player within that 0 to 15 yard space. And then, you can have some issues going over the top, but the 0 to 15, he's going to be a fantastic player. So I'm really curious on how the Colts are going to utilize him this year. I do think there are some opportunities when it comes to some of their third down plays, cover 3 Mabel. You can have him on the backside, have him press coverage on that backside, and really compete with guys on these third down calls, and take away that top option like they did it with DeAndre Hopkins at times and Calvin Ridley at times last year. But that's all moot if he can't stay healthy, and what concerns me a little bit about his health is I don't want to make the comparison to like a Paris Campbell, where Paris Campbell, obviously it was just one thing after another, and it was a really unfortunate early career for Paris Campbell. But with Juju Brents, I got some concerns in the same way when I was watching that rookie season, where it's like every time he got healthy, it wasn't like it was the same injury popping up again. It was just different injuries, so many different injuries that sidelined him, and they weren't like minor little scrapes. They were injuries that sidelined him for a couple weeks, or that hampered him for an entire training camp and such like that. So it really comes down to the health. And Chris Ballard honestly said a lot of it too in the postseason presser. For him to constantly bring up health like that when he was talking about Juju Brents, I thought was a very important thing, where it's like the Colts are also in that same boat where he's got to be out there, he's got to stay healthy, he's got to get on the field, because having 300 coverage snaps your rookie season when you were essentially handed the starting job, when he was going to be healthy, obviously that is, I mean, that's That's an important thing. He's got to be able to get out there and get more snaps than just the 295 is what he finished with last year. He's got to have more than 295, obviously, going forward. But I'm optimistic with Juju Brents. I think there were some good things on film. I think, coverage wise and where his eyes were a lot of times were good. I think he was competitive at the catch point in a lot of ways. He was physical in the run game, had some really good moments where he could have come with some more interceptions and some more ball production. And a lot of his issues really came down to, communication issues, which is kind of expected out of a guy who missed all of his rookie training camp. So Juju Brents, I am optimistic about. I do think there can be some good things with him. And obviously, this Colts defense can take a huge step forward if he can take a positive leap in year two. If he can go from, a flashing young rookie to a solid year two player, this Colts defense is going to be in a really, really good place, or a much better place, obviously, than where we're projecting it right now. So Juju Brent's obviously a big part of this all. Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo on the defensive line, and then Braden Smith on offense, like we said at the beginning of the show, where his on-off splits were massive. These are some guys who, again, they're not like underrated players, but these are 4 players where if they can stay on the field and take little steps forward, like doesn't have to be these massive jumps to superstardom, but just little steps forward, this Colts team can be in the playoffs next year, be a competitive football team throughout all of 2024. That's all I have for today, guys, though. Thank you for joining us this week on Locked On Colts. Jake will be back with you guys next week with an interview with Eddie McGilvra, the guy who's worked with every Colts defensive lineman on this team. It's a really fun interview that Jake is excited to push out there early next week. And before I get out of here, though, I do remind you guys that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts, plus Locked On plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. If you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we list your podcast. We love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here early next week.